I remember moving to New York in the fall of 1980, after just finishing the Wall tour with Pink Floyd and deciding I didn't know if the band was going to go out again, but I had enjoyed New York. My wife was from New York, so we moved to New York, and the first job I got here was with in Octave Plateau Electronics, located on Broadway and 21st, and joined the company as production manager, and really to oversee all of the technical side, because they had Octave, which was the manufacturer of the Cat and the Kitten, and Plateau, which was a service company, and Octave Plateau was the combined company, with Carmine and Fred in charge of everything. Carmine Bonanno did all the engineering, really good engineer, but he wanted to free his time away from the manufacturing side to concentrate on design and development. And when I joined the company at that time, they were just the Cat SRM was pretty much the end of its production run, but they got an order from the London Synth Centre for more Cats and Kittens, so Carmine did a redesign, and that's how the Cat SRM2 came out, and the Kitten 2. And that was a digitally scanned keyboard, CEM chips, and basically Carmine did the design. We did a production run, not that many, it was a couple of hundred units, I think maybe 500 at the most, specifically for the London Synth Centre. But Carmine could see that the monophonic market was kind of drying up, so he wanted to do a polyphonic. I mean, the Prophet 5 was out and was really, a phenomenal instrument and really changed the whole market. And he wanted to design a polyphonic instrument, and talking about how it should be packaged, and discussed 19-inch rack gear, which was familiar to the pros on the road. It hadn't really come and in studios, but it never really been applied to the synth world. And the whole idea of doing a separate keyboard from a head in 19-inch rack format, that's what Carmine developed and we pressed forward on. Plus we'd already done the digital scan keyboard for the Cat SRM2, so the scanning for the VPK5 keyboard was a development of that circuitry. And of course the big change between the monophonics and the polyphonics is it's microprocessor controlled, and this is a 6502 base unit. And Carmine was smart enough to hire a guy called Bruce Frazier, who was wonderful, excellent programmer, young guy, knew about synths, and so Carmine was doing most of the hardware, Bruce was doing the software, and I built all the prototype boards, and we were putting the units together to test it. And originally there was going to be Voyetra 1, which was the monophonic version, and the idea was you set your patch up on the 1 and then dump it to the 8. But he wanted to make the polyphonic first because that's where the market was, so the Voyetra 8 was developed first. I think there was only one kind of crude prototype of the 1. But things changed. Change in technology in the 80s, but the main thing that came around was MIDI. So the first Voyetra 8s were non-MIDI. use the standard mic cable to connect the keyboard, the remote keyboard. A little bit on the history of it. Originally it was going to be a membrane panel, but the switches in the membrane panel, the manufacturer couldn't get it in timely manner and a cost-effective manner, so the compromise was to use non-touch switches, but regular switches with a monologue that cutouts through. Selling the polyphonics, most people, there was an interesting fact that came in that most Prophet 5s that returned to the factory still had the factory patches in. So there was a discussion on, well, do we really need to make a fully programmable unit? Do we have to make the Voyetra 1 or have the Voyetra 8 as a preset with some controls over the setting? So the first Voyetra 8s were made, the prototype of the Voyetra 1 was made, then this issue of, well, do people really going to program their patches? Let's just keep the Voyetra 8. We had very limited manpower and resources, so it was decided just to concentrate on the Voyetra 8. And of course then what happened is people wanted to do all the editing. We didn't have the Voyetra 1, and that's why the idea of the OBXA had just come out with the first kind of multi-pages, so it was thought, let's give multi-pages to the front panel. So that's why the multi-page feature was done, so you could program every parameter, and because the Voyetra 1 was never made. I have a weakness for Voyetra 8s, of course, being involved in the manufacture of the first ones. And all the first ones were hand soldered, and if you estimate how many solder joints there are in a Voyetra 8, it's in the thousands. So reliability was an issue, and that's why we turned to flow soldering, and then the reliability just went up great, and the revisions of the software. But MIDI made the major change. Carmine and Octave Plateau was one of the first, I think the number 5 or something in the MIDI spec as manufacturers. They were part of that initial meeting at NAMM, and Carmine came back and said, we're going to incorporate MIDI. And everyone asked, well, what's MIDI? And he explained the interface, and it was incorporated in. So the original Voyetras before MIDI were XLR balanced output, as well as the regular 1/4 inch. So when the MIDI spec came to be spec'd, and Carmine said we're going to incorporate MIDI and do the whole update, and the question is, we had all the cases made, what we're going to use. So we'll use the XLR, and in fact the XLR on the MIDI spec is allowed as a connector. No one was sure if the 5-pin DINs would hold up, but the XLR was allowed as a connector. But I think it was the only manufacturer that used it. The wiring's pretty straight ahead, by the way. But that's why when we switched to MIDI, they used the XLRs because the panels were already built. They're just beautiful, what can I say? The voice structure, the development of which VCAs to use in the mixing section, etc. And the voicing did change from the first models to the later ones, but it improved constantly. So by the time they got to the last model, they're really solid and reliable. And I think Bruce's MIDI implementation and software implementation, because the LFOs and the ADSRs are all software generated, but I think his code is magnificent.